2016. My guest right now is our keynote speaker. Cade Metz is a senior editor at Wired magazine. He has been writing about technology for over 30 years and has done a wide variety of writings, journalism. Cade, first and foremost, what was your experience like here addressing the Realcomm conference?
It was fun. We talked about quite a few things, everything from artificial intelligence to self-driving cars to Bitcoin and the blockchain. There's no shortage of interesting stuff to cover here in the Valley and to talk about.
When you look out at the real estate space, what are some of the opportunities that might be low-hanging fruit that people could pluck if they would just pay attention to it?
It's interesting. There are so many technologies that can, in theory, really change the industry. You know, the blockchain is one, and this online ledger that can keep track of anything of value. So that could include things like real estate leases. I think that's a technology that's headed in this direction. A lot of people are already thinking about that.
I mean, I recently read something you wrote about the head of Overstock.com
Right.
really getting involved in Bitcoin technology, the
Right.
blockchain again
Yes.
being used there. Are there any other technologies that you see immediately applicable to our industry?
Right. Well, on stage during the keynote, we talked about what's often called the Internet of Things, right? The ability to put sensors and beacons into homes and into buildings that allow you to more easily manage your home, that allow devices in your home to communicate or in your business. It's an old idea, but the thinking among a lot of people is that we can really reach the point where this type of thing really works. That's another something that's around the corner.
As you travel from offices of Wired and other businesses and journalistic outlets that you frequent, what have been some of the most interesting technological innovations you've seen in the building space?
In the building space?
Well, you walk into an elevator, or you walk. What are the things you're beginning to see where you are?
We are beginning to see, the ability to regulate temperature, change lighting, have those types of systems even speak to each other.
Yeah.
It's still a niche thing at this point, but it is happening, and the thinking is that this will be much more pervasive in years to come.
If you had to design something to make living easier, to make
Right.
navigating your way through a business or an office easier, what's your pet peeve, and what's the
My
thing
pet
you would,
peeve.
if you could invent and design anything?
I'm really interested in sort of the ambient temperature, right?
Yeah.
So if I could accurately and reliably control that, I'd be happy.
Would you imagine it to be, probably have to be a wearable of some kind, or a body sensor, right?
It could be, or just the ability to make sure that my area of my building is the right temperature for me. That could be as easy as a button on a smartphone app. That's fine as long as it works.
Interesting. Even localized,
Sure.
to be able to have a different temperature there and there.
Right? Why not?
Given that many people watching this right now may never be able to see your keynote, so have no fear of repeating certain things, looking out at technology as a whole,
Right.
just as a field unto itself, what are the most exciting trends that you're beginning to see?
Well, we did talk a lot during the keynote about this move towards deep neural networks, a form of artificial intelligence which is now allowing, say, Facebook to recognize faces in photos, or Google to recognize the commands you speak into your cell phone. And it's starting to understand, not just recognize words, but understand natural language and respond to that. This is something that's really changing the big internet companies, including Google, Facebook, Apple. Amazon now has a device called the Echo, which you can put on the living room
Sure.
table in your home, and you can speak to it. And on a certain level, it can understand what you're saying and respond. Allows you to order things, to ask what the weather is, and so on. Other services can integrate with this, and you can perform those tasks that you would normally perform on your smartphone just by speaking. It's still early with that sort of natural language technology, but that's where things are headed in many different markets.
It's interesting to be able to order paper towels by talking to Alexa. It's interesting,
Right.
but it's not life-changing yet.
Right.
If we project forward a little bit further, do you begin to see around the corners of where it could be much more interesting?
Sure. These same technologies are driving the push towards self-driving cars, right? These same technologies that can learn from vast amounts of data are going to play into these self-driving cars that Google and so many other manufacturers in Detroit are building. That's going to fundamentally change our lives, right?
Yeah.
Right. Marry that with what Uber and what Lyft are doing, the ability to hail a car at any given moment. Today it's a car that has a driver. Tomorrow it will be a self-driving car, right? And if you can do that, it changes car ownership, right? It changes real estate in the sense that where do you put those cars? Where do you park them? Do you need the parking lots that you needed in the past, right? There's so many questions to think about, logistical questions, but also ethical questions when it comes to all these technologies.
Let's talk about them.
Right.
What are some of the questions that we haven't even started to ask ourselves?
Well, I mean, luckily, I think that people are beginning to at least ask these questions because they need to be asked. We don't have good answers, but one of the things I think about a lot is what's called, and this often comes up when self-driving cars are the subject. It's called the trolley problem. It's an old thought experiment, and decades ago, the idea was if you're on a trolley, and you've got 20 people, and you're headed down the track, towards a ravine, but you can switch the trolley onto another track, but there's a person tied there. What do you do, right? Do you save the 20 or do you save the one? And a utilitarian will tell you to save the 20, but not everyone agrees with that, right? And our self-driving cars are going to be in situations where they face similar conundrums, right? I mean, it boils down to, a situation where it might have to choose between killing you and killing me. We can't let our machines make that decision. We won't stand for that, but will we stand for, say, a Google engineer predetermining what happens in that situation? I don't know if we're going to stand for that either.
Wow.
So it is a conundrum that has no easy answer. I think that these sorts of machines will make the roads safer. Accidents will go down, and the thinking among some AI researchers is that as safety improves, that we will accept sort of a change in our cultural norms. That it will be okay for that one scenario I talked about or the other. But it's an open question. There's so many open questions.
So many, including timelines. Now, this is a dumb question because you don't know.
Right.
But how long before we really start to see self-driving cars out on the street as a regular occurrence? Do you imagine?
I think it'll still be many years, and that these ethical questions might play into that.
Right.
If we have a fatality, for instance, even one that could really set things back, right? So it is unclear, but Google self-driving cars have been driving the streets in the Bay Area for years now, right? I mean, this is a real technology. The trick is, not only dealing with these ethical problems, but dealing with regulatory problems and other logistical problems, and that's gonna take a while as well.
What other technologies, no matter how small, get you as thoughtful and excited as self-regulatory, ambient temperature, self-driving cars? What else has Cade Metz interested?
We talked about this during the keynote as well. Oddly enough, the idea of cloud computing, I think, is a fascinating idea that not a lot of people grasp, and not a lot of people understand how it's really changing our world. In the past, if I wanted to build something, if I wanted to build a piece of software, if I wanted to build a company, I had to invest a lot of money in computers, right? In lots of kind of foundational software. I had to rent space in a data center, and now you can go onto a single machine, and access a cloud computing service from someone like Amazon or Google, and I can build on their infrastructure. So they can handle the foundation, and I can more easily build a business. I can more easily take advantage of all these new technologies, these AI technologies, so to speak. Google has built these AI services for its own use, but now it's starting to share these with other people and businesses through what's called cloud computing. That means if I want to build an image recognition service like Google has built, I don't have to start from scratch, right? I can use this thing that they have already built. I can run it on their infrastructure.
Right.
I think that creates a fundamental change in any industry, whether it's real estate or any other.
I'll leave you with one last idea.
Right.
What we're talking about to some degree is openness, open platforms, allowing people to use and build on what you've already built.
Right.
And there's either an abundance or a scarcity mentality. There are certain companies here that has really opened up their toolkits to people. And those companies have succeeded, but in order to do that, there was a real crisis of the soul where they had to say, are we really going to give away something we used to charge for?
Right.
Having thought about this yourself and grappled with it, where do you see this going?
I think this is fundamentally changing the way the world operates. It starts, here in Silicon Valley, but this is an attitude that drives a Google, it drives a Facebook. Their whole philosophy is to accelerate the progress of these technologies by essentially giving them away. Right? If you can get the rest of the world helping you build these things, it's naturally going to accelerate it, and it's a counterintuitive thing. You would think that a Google would always hold on to its biggest secrets.
Right.
But in a lot of ways, that doesn't make sense. It makes more sense to give it away, and then you end up making your money in different ways. It's a fundamental change in thinking that a lot of people are slow to grasp. But I think it's a hugely important thing.
I give you $500 million, hypothetically.
Right.
And I say to you, Cade, I'm giving you $500 million. You have to start a company.
Right.
You have to start it today.
Right.
And it has to be in the real estate space, in this type of space. What type of company, and I realize that this is not a field, but if you had to go, you know what, I put my bet on this.
Right.
What type of technology?
I would immediately zero in on that blockchain idea that we talked about.
So the ability for people to say, just as I know a friend of mine picked up the lease of a car from someone else, and that was enabled by blockchain.
Right. Well, so now the way it works, a lot of it's still paper, right? A lot of it's going through middlemen. A lot of it is inefficient. Think of it like this: rather than having to rely on all sorts of people and companies to transfer ownership of anything, whether it's money or a piece of stock or a lease, a title to a car.
Yeah.
What if you had machines that could handle that, right?
Yes.
That fundamentally creates greater efficiency, right? It makes a lot of sense. You aren't beholden to a central entity in a lot of ways. You can worry about other things, right? Plus, it's more accurate, right? You don't have to worry about that piece of paper being lost. You don't have to worry as much about human error, that kind of thing.
Very cool. Cade, we want to thank you for being here at Realcomm, for sharing your thoughts with us, not only about the future of real estate technology, but also the future in technology in general. And we're going to look forward to seeing what you continue to share and what you're doing at Wired. And it's great to be in your neck of the woods here in Silicon Valley.
Right.
Any last thought for people in this industry who are really trying to leverage technology as well as they possibly can?
I think we've covered it. I appreciate you having me.
Very good. Cade Metz, thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Cade Metz, Senior Editor at Wired. Really giving us an insight into how the technologies that we look at today in other fields can be applied to real estate technology in general.